The Starside Prophecy by Tirri. Read by the author. Chapter 2. Inauguration Hall. There are 24 parishes dotted throughout Starside, each more or less the same size, and each tasked to monitor specific segments of the globe. Parish 7 oversees the lives of those souls residing in England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, France, Spain, Portugal and Italy. This is where I was walking, alongside the Godson, as we made our way across the square toward the fountain. We were on our way to Inauguration Hall. For what reason I still did not know, but I did know the effect of the sacrament was starting to wear off, and I was once again very near to becoming the smaller version of me. Each parish has a central square as its hub, a gathering place of liveliness and merriment from dusk till dawn, the many distinctive and soaring buildings surrounding the place inspiring awe in every soul coming and going there, but not me. The enormous globe orbiting some 40,000 miles above my head had seized every shred of my attention. I should have worn a wide-brim hat, I thought as I looked up, not wanting to, but not being able to help it either. The artist's masterpiece silhouetted against the vastness of the Milky Way comprised every tone of every shade of every colour: blue waters, green swamps and emerald jungles, golden yellow prairies and deserts, the varied browns of the lower mountain ranges and the whites of the tallest, all covered by an array of swirling white and grey cloud. I deliberately looked away as if doing so was somehow offending the planet I was about to revisit. Good, I thought. Then I brought my attention back to the immediate environment. Without loitering, which was almost impossible, it takes about 40 minutes on foot to get from one side of the square to the other. Central to every square is an enormous fountain, each unique and ancient, and showering the air with dewdrops of youth-preserving minerals that ensure the effects of ageing are suspended. Consequently, all residing Starside appear to be in their early 30s. I trailed my hand in the font before looking up at the crowning centrepiece, long ago named the Unity of Life. A once enormous chunk of marble, the Unity of Life was carved by the Godson immediately upon completing his final incarnation as Jesus. It had taken the Godson exactly 365 days to sculpt, a monument to honour the notion that symbols are indeed a powerful way of presenting abstract ideas and processes. The Unity of Life comprised 2 enormous lions, both males, resting on their haunches. One had a pigeon standing between its front paws, the other a crow. Between the pigeon's feet rested a mouse, and between the crow's feet a gecko. Between the mouse's feet was a cricket, and between the gecko's was a centipede. On the day of its unveiling, Alusha's first observation had been that the composition was the epitome of the word acceptance. Unity of Life was indeed a representation of a future moment when heaven on earth would come to pass, but I had been too much of a sceptic to take the idea seriously, and I still couldn't. "The square is abnormally quiet today, don't you think?" I said as the Godson and I veered left to begin our passage down a wide cobblestone path leading directly to Inauguration Hall. "Yes, I saw to that. I know how you get when people stare." I shrugged. The lack of activity feels eerie. Next time I could just wear dark glasses and a baseball cap. "My love, it's me who would need them, not you. And besides, there won't be a next time," responded Melchizedek, laughing. "Ah, the first wonder of the very ancient world. Isn't that the most beautiful building you have ever seen?" I looked towards the enormous building Melchizedek was pointing to. It grew in stature as we neared it. Inauguration Hall was not a crystalline skyscraper like the others, but the flashy inspiration behind King Herod's first-century showpiece. It was a sprawling extravaganza of gleaming gold porticos, columns and archways, causing refractions of darting light that bounced off the gilded roofs and then separated into component colours, making even the most extravagant fire show on earth look dull by comparison. "Yes, it is beautiful if you like being blinded," I responded, unmoved. A pair of sunglasses immediately appeared on my face. "Thanks," I said. "How considerate of you." "That's only one of my many virtues," said Melchizedek, laughing again. I wondered what he was so happy about, but I didn't ask. I would find out soon enough. 10 mostly silent minutes followed until we reached the hundreds of steps that led up to the main front doors of Inauguration Hall. The godson ran his fingers through his hair and then stretched his hand towards the usher who was bounding down the steps to greet us. The usher was obviously of Roman descent, his aquiline nose his most prominent feature, or perhaps it was his thick bushy eyebrows. His long white robe contrasted vividly with the tone of his smooth dark skin, and he wore a large pectoral cross. "Signore, benvenuto," the usher gushed, reaching for Melchizedek's outstretched hand and kissing it. He then turned to me and smiled. "You must be Sarah. I have been appointed to take good care of you." Hoping to sound feisty but good-humoured, I said, "I can take good care of myself, thank you, but I do appreciate the thought." I had not managed to sound good-humoured. The usher took the lead and I followed him up the steps with the godson behind me. Although it was a long way up, I was not the least bit breathless. It was as if we had just ascended a normal staircase. As we reached the top, a rather foreboding set of metallic doors began to open 50 feet in front of us. Then, like a moth to a flame, Melchizedek strode towards them, leaving me in the hands of the usher. "Come," he said genially, leading me into the building. "Melchizedek will not want you to miss a thing." As we followed the godson into the building, the doors closed. The thud had apparently announced that we were the last of the attendees, and I jumped. The godson must have entered one of the smaller doors on the outer rim of the vast circular lobby because he was nowhere to be seen. My cowboy boots made a clinking sound on the floor, an intricate mosaic of white opalescent moonstone embedded with trails of creamy pearls that formed an image of a 5-pronged star. I felt disrespectful for walking on it. Torches of white flame fire hung at regular intervals on the silvery walls, and the white translucent substance covering the ceiling rippled like moving water. I quivered when I caught my distorted reflection. "Would you like a seat in the front row?" inquired the usher, whose quick pace I tried to match. "There's one reserved for you." "Thank you, but no. I would prefer to stand at the back on one leg with a brick on my head than be trapped at the front." I was trying to be funny again, but my tone betrayed me. The usher did not react to my sarcasm, the type of person I would like to pinch to see if he was capable of reacting to anything. "That's perfectly fine," he said. "You'll still be able to see everything, and the acoustics are impeccable, so you'll be able to hear everything too. Enjoy the ceremony." Through another elaborate set of pewter doors, we entered the main auditorium. I was the last person to arrive. I quickly positioned myself to the right of the entry and leaned against a column the size of a mature oak tree. The usher nodded as if confirming this was okay, and then he took his place like a sentry next to the doors we had entered through. He was apparently not only my usher, but my guard. I looked around the auditorium while breathing in the cool atmosphere and noting the nervous hush. Plush cream seating filled the cavernous interior. The metallic white walls were lit from behind, casting a translucent silvery glow over all in attendance. There were a few empty seats. Only those brave enough to embark on their human cycles had made it this far. When the witching hour loomed, it was difficult not to get cold feet. I remembered my inauguration long ago. I had been too proud to leave, and by the time I had completed my first cycle, not leaving was a decision I deeply regretted. I looked towards the front. The long table in the centre of the stage was adorned with a white linen covering. On top was a red apple, centrally placed, blushing under the single spotlight bearing down on it. Around the apple's stem, a small snake about a foot long flaunted its diamond markings. The snake, the symbol of temptation to which every soul would inevitably yield, stared out at the audience, flicking its tongue intermittently. To the right of the snake, a white dove sat at ease, nesting despite the fact that its neighbour was the epitome of deathly stealth. A single goblet had been positioned on the other side of the snake. Its milky contents would help calm the nerves of those on the brink of their human cycles. The altar had been adorned in the same manner since the first batch of souls pledged their commitment long ago. The whispering died down when the speaker walked onto the stage. Everyone applauded as he made his way to the lectern in front of the altar. The swearing-in ceremony was about to begin. The speaker, clothed in flowing white robes, stood tall and erect, and after taking in a lungful of air, began with the well-worn words, "Since the conception of the Ascension Programme, endless souls have been offered the same opportunity you have been offered. Many declined, and it is therefore our privilege to exalt those who have chosen to become more. Congratulations and welcome. Your courage is admirable." The audience looked pleased with this compliment. I looked on intently, wondering when Melchizedek would make his appearance. The speaker's words were identical to those I had heard at my inauguration. Sector 6 of local universe 459 is home to 124 billion galaxies, and the Milky Way, the smallest of those galaxies, contains the training ground Melchizedek created especially for you. When you leave the building tonight, look up. You will notice a soft ring of golden light silhouetting the planet. Think of the halo as a shield of protection, keeping you safe as you learn and grow. A few souls murmured, "Safe from what?" I had wondered the same thing when in their position. The speaker continued, "Earth is a relatively new planet, sharing the vastness of space with countless others, some inhabited, some vacated, some supernova remnants of former training grounds. Others are still undergoing the business of establishing the precise atmospheric conditions in which to host sentient life. Several of these have been set aside for inspection. Should man spoil Earth, suitable alternatives are available, but if all goes well, planet Earth will be your home on and off, not for just a foreseeable but unforeseeable future. Does everyone present today understand the level of commitment required?" From the back of the auditorium I could see souls nod in agreement throughout the crowd, but a young soul sitting in the third row raised her hand. "Yes, Elizabeth, you have a question?" Elizabeth stood up and swallowed. "I am so sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering what will happen to planet Earth when we have all graduated." I honed in on Elizabeth. Her long black hair was lustrous, as if someone had ironed every silky strand. I could not see Elizabeth's face, but she no doubt wore a look of trepidation mixed with wonder. She knew nothing about what being a human entailed. I suspected being someone's pet dog was the nearest she had come. Her consciousness would soon receive anti-force, and soon thereafter she would crave the return of her carefree existence. The fact that she wondered what would happen to Earth after we all graduated made me want to laugh. That should have been the last question on her mind. "Well, Elizabeth," said the speaker, "although Starside's sister planet looks permanent, there will come a time when Earth will only be populated by those who want to be there, rather than those who need to be. Melchizedek will determine the planet's future at that time. No one knows whether he will collapse the Earth's core or designate the planet as a place for recreation. It matters little to Melchizedek, because with a single exhalation he is able to create another just like it." "Oh," said Elizabeth, sitting back down. She must have looked shocked by what the speaker had said, because the newcomer sitting next to her reached for her hand and kept hold of it. The speaker continued, "Starside is the departure point and the place you will return to over and over. You will enter the womb, be born, live according to your life plan, or not, and return. You will then reincarnate as many times as it takes for you to graduate. Does everyone present today understand the basics of the curriculum?" Cautious nods of agreement came from all. The speaker took in another breath. This speech, the same speech he had given thousands of times, was as eloquent as the day he first uttered the words. Having evolved through the primary levels of plant, insect and animal, the human cycles await those seeking the opportunity to experiment in the confines of duality. The law of duality means that the existence of light creates a powerful reaction from the dark, which makes planet Earth one of the most brutal of all training grounds. The speaker inhaled a longer breath and tempered his voice so each word rested in its own atmosphere. "You have chosen to be cast out in order to create yourself through trial and tribulation. You have chosen to be tested, chosen to be refined. You have chosen to become more than you are. After attaining the correct sensitivity regarding the laws of your existence, you will one day learn to deny the anti-force, thereby becoming the creator of your own experience. None of you will fail at this, only the time it takes will differ. I heard the rise and fall of murmuring as the speaker took a sip of water. He then looked out upon the sea of faces before him. With few exceptions, newcomers always had the same expression, fresh and expectant, unscathed. I felt sorry for them all. Permission by the higher orders of intelligences to create a planetary system is only ever considered if the Godson is willing to subject himself to the same laws his creations will be subject to. Subjective creature experience is demanded of all creators, no exceptions. Whatever you go through, the Godson has already experienced. The journey is the same for all of us. Repeat after me. We are all on the same journey. Some are just further along than others. The audience repeated the speaker's words in drone-like unison, and my compassion for them once again surged. I knew very well what lay ahead. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other, and I noticed the usher was keeping a not-so-discreet eye on me. I waited for the speaker to continue. Since planet Earth's conception, Melchizedek has lived an incalculable myriad of lives in the form of an endless array of species, from the most trivial expressions of energy to the current creatures of free will intelligence and beyond. Some say human beings are his crowning achievement, and others his greatest failure. But we know the truth from Melchizedek's point of view, don't we? We know the truth, responded the crowd. The speaker nodded his approval before continuing. There are currently 22 godsons abiding in Sector 6. All have perfected their focus sufficiently to create entire planetary systems by instantaneous thought-form projection. This phenomenon was recorded in the first chapter of the old book, Genesis. Melchizedek is one such godson who brought into being the training ground known as Earth some 4 billion years ago, and in the many distant years from now, the opportunity will arise for you all to be able to do the same. This statement incited a rapturous round of applause. The speaker smiled. It was not necessary to point out the obvious. What human beings were destined to become was beyond the imagination of everyone present. When the applause faded, the speaker continued. The primary objective of your upcoming journey is to learn how to call forth the unseen using thought-form energy. The capacity to create future experience from unrefined energy is the divine power that will shortly be assigned to you. The function of the anti-force consciousness is to compel you to harness your thoughts, and only when you are proficient at thinking consciously is it possible for the corresponding material reality to manifest. Only after you are proficient at manifestation is it possible to enter into more advanced levels of creativity. The audience seemed pleased with the speaker's last pronouncement, but I shook my head ruefully. I felt the price was just too high, and then I wondered whether the speaker's assertion was even possible. I had wondered this many times. I was familiar with those souls who had advanced, but were they special in some way? Had they been favoured? Were their minds configured differently? The only answer I ever got from Melchizedek was no, followed by the declaration that he was no respecter of persons. On cue, Melchizedek stepped through an opening in the curtain from the right wing of the stage. He looked as he normally did, young, rugged and serene. His long blonde hair was nestled into the nape of a white linen shirt, his sleeves rolled up to the elbow. He was wearing beige trousers. The snake's eyes were no longer on the audience, but focused intently on Melchizedek. The speaker retreated. "I am Melchizedek. Welcome." The godson briefly met my gaze, and his smile held humour, or perhaps it was a smirk. I then heard these words. "Pay attention, young lady. You will be very happy about this." Melchizedek then refocused his attention on the audience and continued where the speaker had left off. The longevity of planet Earth is dependent on how many souls have use for it. The population is due to steadily decrease as souls outgrow the need to return. Everyone present today belongs to the final batch. I repeat, the final batch. Once you are all safely in your mother's wombs, planet Earth will enter its reduction phase. Jesus Christ, I said, it's about bloody time. I had not meant for anyone to hear, and bit my lip as a couple of souls turned around to stare. There was no judgment in their eyes, just curiosity. I leaned back against the wall, overcome with relief. Melchizedek and I locked the briefest of glances before he continued. You are about to enter my training ground. Here you will learn the rudiments of thought application. How well or how poorly you do will be evident in the quality of your experiences. Bestowed with the autonomy to think, choose and act, you too will be subject to the same unbending law of cause and effect as those who have gone before you, including me. Every action a person takes will be duplicated in the future as an effect, whether instantly, an hour from now, a week, a month, a year, 10 years, or in another lifetime. However long those of us Starside need to arrange the conditions, does everyone understand the law of karma? You will be each subject to it. Most shouted a jubilant yes, but several souls abruptly stood up. I couldn't see the expression on their faces, but I knew that panic would have been their primary attribute. An usher stepped forward from his place in the wings and gestured for them to follow him up the aisle. Since the beginning, self-accountability had been a frightening concept, especially for those souls who had a firm grasp on what divine justice actually meant. I waited for the departing souls to walk by me, all with their heads down as if making eye contact with anyone would make their walk of shame more difficult to endure. The usher, keeping his eye on me, was already holding the door open. I wondered what the departing souls would choose to do with their existence now. Something slower and more dignified, perhaps. Something less taxing and less demanding than the rigours of the Ascension program, for sure. Perhaps the ultimate power of unadulterated godship was not for everyone, just the very ambitious. The crowd was respectfully silent because the sombre moment had penetrated their hearts too. There but for the grace of God go I was no doubt the prevailing sentiment. Another usher walked onto the stage carrying a thurible containing pebbly grains of powder suspended from a long silver chain. He handed it to Melchizedek and returned to the wings. Melchizedek began swinging the thurible to a swell of soft choir music. The snake behind him began to rise up in a wavy motion until the tip of its tail rested on the top of the apple. It held its position steadily, hissing and darting its tiny tongue into the cool air. The dove remained calm. With his hand pressed to his heart, Melchizedek said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this part of the ceremony signifies the great truth of your upcoming journey. You will be entering the confines of a judgment-free realm where you are free to live the lives of your making with absolute impunity. This means you will never be forsaken or condemned, no matter how far from the light you recede." When certain this truth had hit home, Melchizedek welcomed two guest speakers to the stage. After shaking their hands, he stood to one side to listen to their testimonies. Both were older souls, now ascended, and both had succumbed to the pressure of the anti-force countless times. They were dressed informally and had come to offer their encouragement. After entertaining the crowd with some of their more dramatic exploits of their lifetimes as tyrants and villains and crooks, both exited the stage to a standing ovation. Melchizedek once again took his place in front of the lectern. His final message was brief. "You will presently be separated from everything you love and everything you understand. You will then begin the journey of harnessing the forces set in place for your development so that your eyes shall be open and you shall be as gods knowing good and evil." As soon as Melchizedek had spoken these words, the snake withdrew into its original position, curling around the base of the apple. Its eyes closed. It was now time for the altar call. Choir music continued to play as a tidy stream of souls lined up the aisles to receive the sacrament. Melchizedek extended the silver goblet containing a milky white substance to the mouth of the first soul in line, and then a bite-sized piece of the self-replenishing fruit was offered. The dove looked quietly on, and so did I. The ceremony took 10 minutes. When those in attendance were once again seated, Melchizedek concluded with the closing words. "I am now sending you out as sheep amidst the wolves. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves, and remember, thought is creative. Thought is the starting point of every experience that will ever arise, and as you advance towards this truth, may your guiding light be strong. Melchizedek then outstretched his right arm, and the dove flew to his waiting palm. The eternal life of your birthright continues as the next phase of your development begins. When we meet again, you will be proficient at regulating your thoughts and ready for higher levels of attainment. Until then, amen and amen. Melchizedek then bowed his head and walked off the stage with the dove now nestled in his palm. The speaker reappeared from the wings. Ladies and gentlemen, you will now be escorted to the hotel. We hope the accommodations will be worthy of your praise. Tomorrow morning you will be ushered to the Department of Planning, where you will choose the parameters of your first lifetime within consciousness endowed with anti-force. Guys will be waiting to assist you. Finally, on behalf of all Starside personnel, please know that we will be here, behind the veil, waiting patiently for you to return home. For now, it is my pleasure to wish you bon voyage. As the speaker left the stage, the lights went up, and those souls beginning their human cycles filed out of Inauguration Hall and made their way to the hotel on the opposite side of the square. I was now alone in the auditorium and slowly made my way to the altar. As I climbed the steps up to the stage, thoughts of divine relief captured my senses, and all I could think about was drinking from the goblet. I reached for it and took a large gulp of the milky white substance, with my gaze fixed on the serpent. It was as if my presence was causing its life force to slowly withdraw. I couldn't look away. Tiny lacerations began to appear all over the apple's shiny skin, and the disintegration process happened rapidly after that. I bit my lip. All that was left now was a mound of greyish-white powder. I jumped when Melchizedek put his arm around my shoulder. I was overwhelmed by what I had witnessed and so had not heard his footsteps. As we both stood still with our heads slightly bowed, a soft breeze enveloped us. I looked up at him. The Godson's expression was that of an eager young boy. He pinched my chin with his fingers, tilting it upward. Happy now? I didn't know what to say. I was astonished by what had happened. The fact that the last of us were through after today was something I doubted would ever happen. Although there were still over 7 billion of us dealing with the choppiness of order stained with the malevolence of chaos, that was the system that the Godson had set in motion, I was elated that at least no more souls would be following. Ultimately, what was on offer to souls willing to be broken time and time again was indeed extraordinary, but they simply had no idea that their scars would take lifetimes to heal, no idea that it would be they themselves who did the mutilating. The lighting in the auditorium suddenly dimmed to a pale, soft pink glow, and Melchizedek removed his fingers from my chin. He then stepped back a foot or so as I watched his physical image began to morph into another person entirely. I saw him as I remembered him at Golgotha. He was bare-chested and wearing a crown of thorns, but they were not hurting him. He raised his palms to me, and I saw 3 puncture wounds in each hand, but they were not bleeding. The Godson smiled and pulled me to him. I closed my eyes and steadied myself on the altar. I knew what was about to happen. The hazy orange blur behind my eyelids was already transforming into frantic images of light and colour and sound, and then, as the show solidified, the many lifetimes that bound us flashed through my consciousness. I opened my eyes, and I sprung towards my lover. I could barely stand, the exquisite internal sensations causing me to squeal as I wrapped my legs around his waist and my hands around his neck. Then, in front of the lifeless vestiges of what had initiated the entire creation story, our lips touched and our bodies merged as we yielded to the moment, as had happened so many times before.